Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Line Podcast. I'm Jen Gerson here with my co-host, Matt Gurney, for the week of July 19th, 2024. Slow news week in America, obviously. We're going to be chatting and dissecting the Trump assassination attempt and its effects on Canadian politics. Then we're going to be talking the latest Ottawa scuttlebutt. Has Justin Trudeau effectively knifed Mark Carney's political ambitions? Some people seem to think so. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about the flooding in Toronto and more lawsuits against equalization payments. Looking forward to chatting about all of that this week at the Line Podcast.
So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, have you been enjoying your summer? Has it been a relaxing, quiet, peaceful summer for you, Matt? Have you been lounging out at the cottage?
Well, let me tell you. Saturday, I am barbecuing. Mm-hmm. I've got burgers, hot dogs, and sausages on the grill, and I had even made a point of moving the grill a little bit. It's on wheels. I just gave it a little pull
so
that I had a clear lake view.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking out over the calm lake, the ripples of sunlight on the waves, and flipping burgers. I had my little Bluetooth speaker out there with me playing one of my rock and roll playlists. I had a beer. I could not have gone further out of my way without bringing in like a masseuse to rub my shoulders while I barbecued. Mm-hmm. That other than that, I was as relaxed as I was going to be. And I'm like, oh, a message on my phone. It's from my friend. I wonder what good news or pleasant tidings he brings me. Trump has been shot. and I've had a couple of moments in the last couple of years, and I think I'm going to break the fourth wall here. I'm going to speak directly to the viewers and the listeners just for a second, because I'm sure all of you have had moments like this, whether it was the first Trump term or the pandemic or the renewed concern about nuclear annihilation since the war in Ukraine began. I'm sure we've all had these moments where you kind of stop and you're like, is this real life? Because part of me psychologically was struggling to reconcile standing on the patio stones, looking at the sun-dappled lake, drinking a craft beer with thinking through what could have happened if Donald Trump had been hit. Or more seriously hit. And for those first couple of chaotic minutes, the mind wanders, right? Your mind starts thinking, and I began thinking, what if that had taken his head off? What if it had, what the fuck kind of Monday do we have?
Well,
and here in Canada, probably no immediate impact. But are checkpoints popping up all over the United States by now? Or is there rioting?
I mean, okay, so let's be real here, because what you actually did after you got that text message was go back to finishing your barbecuing, because let's also be honest, we are all now so traumatized by chaos. It takes a lot to phase us. And the news quickly came out that Donald Trump would be fine.
I switched my Bluetooth speaker to a news channel, so I kept grilling,
so there you go.
I was listening to the news.
But great. Okay, so that's good adaptive coping.
I wasn't going to ruin the meat.
Yeah, well, that's right, obviously. So I want to chat about a couple of things here. One is we did a very quick written dispatch in the wake of that news, and I think that written dispatch more or less sums up our position. We're not going to waste your time with a lot of moralizing about the evils of political violence, because we are supportive of political violence, but rather because we just assume you've all heard it before at this point.
You don't need me to tell you not to shoot your political rivals.
Yeah,
and it's like if I'm the deciding vote, we're already in deep shit.
There you go. However, I do think that you and I both had this sense of, oh, this is the timeline we're in now, where every once in a while you have these moments in history where people will, that future historians will look back on that moment of history and go like, if that had been just slightly different, history goes that way, and we decided to go this way. And I think that Trump being not killed in that assassination attempt is one of these interesting Rubicon in the timeline type events where we've now gone into a sphere where Trump wasn't killed and we don't have to deal with the consequences of that tragedy. But we do have to deal with now the consequences of what happens when he is now probably elected president. I mean, I don't want to overstate this because, I mean, people will tease me when I'm wrong about these sorts of things, but the odds of Trump not being elected president at this point are extremely low. He was leading prior to the assassination attempt. The assassination attempt, I think, galvanized a lot of his support. He followed up that assassination attempt with a largely considered successful, albeit another weird speech at the Republican National Convention. And the other interesting thing about the Republican National Convention was, of course, he chose J.D. Vance as his running mate and partner. J.D. Vance used to be a really vocal critic of Donald Trump. He was a never Trumper. So the fact that he's managed to bring...
Exceptions apply.
Well, right. But I mean, the fact that he's managed to bring someone like Vance not only into the tent, but now his running mate is an indication that Trump has and his inner circle have completely taken over the Republican Party. Yep. There is no internal faction at this point. It's over. It's done. This is the way this party has chosen to go. And increasingly, it looks like this is the way that this country is going to choose to go.
MAGA has assimilated the GOP.
That's right. So I don't want to get too deep into saying the obvious because also, I mean, you and I are Canadian political commentators. We talk about Canadian politics. We are not particularly highly qualified to discuss the ins and outs of the American system. And I don't want to pretend that we are. I do want to talk about what the implication of all of this is for Canada and for the Canadian system.
Can I take 1 minute first to make one comment about something interesting about the assassination itself?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is going to be a very bloodless, cold-hearted statement. Yes. But I'm just...
Well, no one comes here for the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah.
Come on now. Yeah.
Shooting distance was about 130 meters, about 400 feet. I walked out onto my dock and I looked at what 400 feet is because I used Google Maps to basically tell me which dock further down the bay is as close to me as the shooter was to Trump. And the thing that really jumped out at me was that we're really lucky because 400 feet sounds like a lot, but it's not.
You should set up some beer cans on that dock and then shoot it over the lake just to make that point.
I think
and then
the dock owners would object if I did that.
They could get permission. I mean, I'm just saying if you were to
the cottage is behind the dock based on the angle, so I think they would have problems with that. But
I'm just saying it would be a great YouTube short.
A decent rifle with a decent scope and a relatively qualified shooter is not particularly troubled by hitting a man-sized target at 400 feet. Not only could I make that shot, I have made that shot at ranges that have actual proper length rifle courses. I don't make them 100% of the time, but I might get it 6-7 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I was thinking about, just to think through the dark timeline implications. You want to know the real chaos scenario I settled on?
What?
Grievously wounded Trump.
Oh, yeah. That would have been weird.
And just for the pure, in case the Secret Service is listening to this, we're not endorsing this. We're actually appalled by it. But just in terms of political chaos, an assassinated Donald Trump is a tsunami of chaos onto American politics. But imagine Donald Trump in induced coma with head injury. No one knows if he's waking up, and you're 3 days before the start of the RNC in Milwaukee. What?
That's a pretty good thriller scenario, Matt. Thanks for that.
So the plan is to keep him in an induced coma for 2 or 3 weeks and then bring him out, and you have no idea if he's going to wake up and go, "Hey, I'm fine. I have a headache. What happened?" Or if he's gone, like brain dead. What do the Republicans in Milwaukee do?
Well, fortunately, we don't have to. Fortunately, we don't have to think through that scenario. And this, of course, would have been before he announced his running mate as well. Now that we're officially on all of the watch lists, I would like to also note that, again, from the Canadian side, something that I think Canadian politicians and pundits have to come to terms with is the fact that Trump, for better or worse, has been normalized. Yeah. He's been running for president since 2015. his off-color, his tone, his off-colorness, his xenophobia, I would say his racism, that sort of thing. And I
legal
think
woes,
his legal
including
woes,
convictions.
Yeah, absolutely. All of this is now baked into the assumptions of Trump. None of this is novel.
Americans are going to elect him anyway.
And Americans are going to elect him anyway. None of this is novel. None of this is shocking. And not only are Americans going to elect him, but they're going to elect him, I think, with a pretty strong lead at this juncture of history, with the usual caveats that history is weird and anything can happen. But I'm just saying that if we stay on our current timeline, that's where this is going. So if you as a Canadian progressive or a Canadian politician are sitting around going, when they re-elect Trump, the Canadian electorate is going to be so horrified and so shocked that they will turn against the right en masse.
Run on home back to Trudeau.
Yeah, that is a very naive position, because not only has Trump been normalized for Americans, but I think Trump has been very normalized for the bulk of Canadians. So, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just think
I'd say it's a bad thing. I will overtly say it's a bad
sure.
thing,
I'm going to say
it happened.
I'm going to say that I'm going to say this with moral neutrality here, because I'm trying to be an analyst, not a priest. Okay, but I think that's just the reality.
Yep.
So I don't think that Canadians are going to respond to a Trump presidency by saying, "Oh, we couldn't possibly let that." Like, they're not going to respond in the same way they did in 2016. I just don't think that emotional shock and revulsion is going to be there in the same way. Nope. So it's not something that I think people can bank on if they think that they're going to be able to channel this into some kind of anti-Pierre Poilievre wave.
Well, I think I agree with that, but I also would say, like I've already said, Jen, that I think the Poilievre people aren't stupid, and they know that Trump's going to come out and give a 90-minute raving speech with Hulk Hogan, and Poilievre's going to show up somewhere and say, we're going to build the houses. And the conservatives are going to deliberately counter-program that, where the crazier Trump looks, they're going to have Poilievre show up in a turtleneck somewhere and go, yeah, you know what, I think we need to keep violent criminals behind bars longer. And a lot of Canadians are going to go, yeah, you know what, I agree with that. But I also think, more to your point, to an extent that I don't think a lot of centrist or progressive Canadians understand, Donald Trump is not tricking the American people. He's not doing like a Jedi mind trick on them. They know what he is. They're set to vote for him. And Canadian voters aren't that different than Americans.
No, that's right. So the other thing I would say is of course, I don't want to go into the usual moralizing about political violence, because like I said, everybody who's listened to this podcast a week later has heard this umpteen times. And no one's coming here for moralization. However,
people is bad.
Shooting people is bad, in case that needed saying. Don't shoot people. Not only is political violence an inherent evil in and of itself, it's counterproductive. But like even if you, and it obviously in this case led to a backlash, it's led to the opposite outcome of the one that the shooter, whatever his motivation was. I mean, we understand that's all confusing there, but the backlash is obvious. But then at the same time, look, even if you believe that there's a non-zero chance that Trump is a threat to American democracy, and by the way, I think that is a reasonable assumption. I think there is a non-zero chance that Trump and the people around him represent a significant threat to American democracy, in the sense that I think there's a chance that they will take over their institutions. I think they're going to change institutional norms around certain types of practices and legal codes. And we've already seen the way that Trump appointee judges, for example, have ruled in Trump's favor, and in other types of situations that I don't necessarily, people who are experts in American politics are better qualified to speak to that than I am. And I think that is a serious and legitimate threat. But even if you acknowledge that that's a serious and legitimate threat, by resorting to political violence, shooting him, you are denying your fellow Americans the right to make bad decisions. Say, well, Americans have the right to decide for themselves what kind of democracy they want to live in, and the leadership that they choose to be led by.
Yeah,
they just do. And that's not really for us in Canada to scold anybody about or to come down on them about. This is their call. And we have to respect their call and move on.
And deal with it.
And deal with it.
Respond accordingly.
And deal with it.
Respond to the facts on the ground. Yep.
That's right. So what are the implications of what a likely Trump presidency going to be on Canadian politics? I think it's going to be very minimal. I don't think a Trump presidency undermines Canadian democracy at all. I do think that there's going to be a naive assumption that a Trump presidency is going, among progressives and centrists, that a Trump presidency is going to damage Pierre Poilievre's prospects. I don't think those assumptions will play out in any way. And I do think a Trump presidency represents a very significant risk to areas of defense and economy, which are traditionally conservative sword issues. They're conservative strength issues.
Yeah, sorry, Jen, not to interrupt you here. I wanted just for clarity, when you had said that you don't think Trump will have a big impact on our politics, you mean that quite literally. You mean that in the sense of the partisan politics.
Yes, that's right. Correct.
You're open-minded to the fact that it could have a big effect on Canada.
Oh,
Trump,
yeah, I'm talking. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you for that clarification, because I think we're talking about two different things. I don't think it's going to shift the needle on Canadian partisan politics.
Yep.
A Trump presidency has real significant risks on Canada, Canadians' economy, and Canadians' relationship with our biggest partner in trading.
Which the politicians have to respond to. But that's a
politicians have to respond to. But the paradox is that because Trump does present such a risk to our economy, to our NATO alliances, to all of those sorts of things, the politicians that are actually ironically going to be best situated to respond to those risks will probably be the conservatives. Right? Because if you're talking about pocketbook issues, if you're talking about defense issues, those issues, I think, traditionally tend to swing conservative. Right? Now, Chrystia Freeland and the Liberals get a lot of credit for how they renegotiated the NAFTA, now UNSCA, and to some extent, I think that credit is deserved. But who do you want in that particular future renegotiation of UNSCA? Do you want Freeland in there again, or do you want somebody from the conservative side in there? I mean, I think most Canadians are going to look at that and say,
I think to your point, Jen, like about how normalized Trump has been, I think Canadians are already making that decision because
I think they are.
I think if you are a Canadian who believes, I'm going to give you full benefit of the doubt, if you sincerely believe that the re-election of Donald Trump for a second term is going to have a backlash effect on Canadian politics, I don't think that understanding of the Canadian electorate can fit with where the polling says the Canadian electorate currently is. Right. And I think to believe that there is an imminent backlash pending, I think makes assumptions about the Canadian voter that is just not in accordance with the facts.
That's right.
And people will be mad and say, oh, you're comparing Trump to Poilievre. No, I'm not. I'm saying that the Canadian voter exists in an information world where they know already what's happening in the United States and in the United Kingdom and in Europe and elsewhere. And there has not to date been some massive recoiling away from Pierre Poilievre. If anything, it's the opposite. And, look, we can spend the whole podcast talking about why, and I'm not going to spend more than a moment on it. I don't think it matters why. I just think if you are convinced that the election of Donald Trump is going to have a material polling effect on Canadian politics, hey, look, anything's possible, but I don't see any reason to bet the farm on that.
The other thing I would say is, of course, Trump is, I think, very likely going to come down on NATO in a second term, and Canada is increasingly being singled out as a laggard nation in that alliance. I think there's a very good chance that America is going to use under Trump, is going to use its financial,
leverage,
its financial and moral pulpit to make an example of us.
Yep.
We were talking on this podcast earlier about a possibility of some kind of tariff, 10% tariff on
protectorate. The protectorate tax.
Protectorate tax is something that we've heard kicked around in order to punish us for our inability or on our unwillingness to get to a realistic to meet our
We'll protect you, Canada, but your importers pay for it. Your exporters pay for it.
That's right. That's right. Yep. That would have a catastrophic, well, not catastrophic, I don't want to overstate it. That would have that would be really bad. Canadian quality of life would diminish materially and substantially in that scenario.
You know what the worst part is too?
What?
We deserve it.
Oh, absolutely. We have no moral ground to stand on here. But, if I'm sort of an ordinary Canadian and I'm weighing what the likelihood of my issues are, and I'm worried about my quality of life, I'm worried about how far my dollar is going, which party is going to be best suited to address that possibility. I mean, like the Liberals, who have basically allowed our military to decay over the last 10 years. I mean, I'm not saying that Harper was innocent of this either.
No, he was pretty bad.
He was pretty bad. So no question, the same economic and political incentives apply to both parties. But when I look at it over the last several years, which ideological base has been screaming about the military and the state of the military the loudest and the longest? It's the conservative side. It's the conservative side. I mean, it's been you and me talking about like the impact of allowing our military to degrade and what impact that could potentially have on our trade and quality of life in the long term.
And dozens and dozens of others.
Yeah, exactly, right? And virtually nobody from the progressive side is talking through that possibility or concerned with that possibility, because typically
speaking,
speaking,
Canoe this week?
No, I didn't.
So the Council of the Federation meetings in Halifax, Canoe came out, Premier of Manitoba, and made an explicit call for an accelerated plan to get to 2%. And the reporters said to him, this is kind of an unusual thing for an NDP premier to be saying. And he goes, I need access to American markets to have my people to have jobs and to have a growing economy in my province. And it was just like, I do too. Like, that was just such a spectacularly clear-eyed, no bullshit assessment. No one pointing to a chart of Harper-era defense spending. No one rattling off a list of things Trudeau says he'll buy in 9 years. It was just clear-eyed.
That's the kind of progressivism that we actually need. Clear-eyed, grounded progressivism that is rooted in like the realities of ordinary Canadians and working Canadians and the shit they're actually dealing with en masse. Good for him.
Premier
I like
Canoe,
him.
voice of reason in Canadian politics.
Right? You know, like in the not so distant future, can you see Canada as a two-party system where it's like a Pierre Poilievre versus Wab Kinew? Yes. I can see that outcome. That's a good outcome for the country, with the NDP led by a Wab Kinew figure as a credible, not only opposition, but actual potentially a prime minister and government. That's a Canada that suddenly got real fast, and I am here for that. But anyway, we'll just put that little fantasy pin aside. But good for him. Well done. I mean, I know that the progressives in Canada are definitely taking their cues and their notes from the likes of us, aren't they? But anyway, look, these are kind of I think. True, but these are the kinds of issues that I think we're going to have to come to terms with. So anyway, that's my top line take on the implications of the Trump assassination on Canadian politics. Matt, is there anything else that you would add to that?
I want to talk for a couple of minutes about the Biden situation, but before we wrap up on Trump, I want to make a comment about Donald Trump. And one of the things I've found interesting over the last, I mean, like he said, he's been running since 15, 16. So about 8 or 9 years, is how, particularly since the end of his first term, one of the things I've been worried about in America for a while is that there is a lack of moderating institutions. And one of the things I find interesting about talking about Donald Trump is it is impossible to talk about Donald Trump from a perspective of objective analysis. It's possible to do it, but it's possible to be taken seriously when you do it, because there is no position on Donald Trump that is not interpreted either as endorsing fascism or being part of the libtard cuck media. And I don't care. I got to do the job anyway, right? So I'm just going to call him as I see him. But I'm going to bet you that there is no position on Donald Trump that is not going to be offside with half our audience, no matter what it is. There might be a very small percentage, and I think we at The Line have done a pretty good job of cultivating weirdo thinkers. So I think probably we have a better chance than most of sticking the landing on this one. But it is impossible to have the conversation you and I have had about the fallout of the attempted assassination, about the impact on Canadian politics. There's going to be people who are going to think everything we've said is a coded endorsement of Trump because we did not spend 15 minutes doing a performative denunciation of him as a fascist. And there was going to be others who heard, Jen, what you said about thinking that he poses a possible threat to American institutions, democratic institutions, without them just dismissing that as you being a CBC plant. And that, again, that's fine. Like, we just have to do the job as we see it. But I remember that great term, you'll remember it from the first Trump presidency term, we take him seriously, but not literally. No, I take them both. I take Trump seriously and I take him literally. And I think something that was interesting during the first Trump presidency was that he was surrounded by a bunch of morons, where he had a weird mix. His whole administration was a weird mix of either long-term federal U.S. public service types or long-term GOP, Romney, McCain, Bush era, grand old party institutional types, plus a leavening of MAGA weirdos. And that's probably one of the reasons why Trump's administration was dysfunctional in some ways. I don't think that's going to be the case this time. And I think one of the lessons Trump himself has learned, and certainly the people around him, is that you need to have loyalists. And I don't know how effective the loyalists are going to be at executing their agenda, but you don't need to go direct to a Handmaid's Tale kind of hypothesized future to imagine a scenario in a few years where Florida and California refuse to recognize each other's electoral designates, where the electors, they send to the Electoral College. And again, I'm not banking on this, but I wrote a column 2 years ago in the context of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have to start thinking weird thoughts about American stability, internal or external. And I think we saw this week, and again, I intend this as a value neutral statement, and we'll see if anyone takes it that way. We saw, like we said this before, the mega assimilation of the Republican Party is complete. There will not be restraints or roadblocks on Trump's use of executive power that existed the first time.
Right. There are no, to use a New York Times headline, there are no more adults in the room.
Or, I remember, this is like a long time ago now. I interviewed David Frum many years ago, before Trump was president, but when he was either about to become or had become the Republican nominee. It was just for an AM radio show I hosted at the time. And I asked David at the time, because he and I had been National Post columnists at the Senate. We're not close friends, but I could get him on the phone. And I'd said to him, tell me about the Republican Party as an institution. Who is left who will moderate kind of the weirdo game show host outsider? And at the time, my assumption was that is what was going to be what was going to happen, that the Republican Party would go, oh, okay, well, the voters have given us this guy, this New York Democrat real estate developer game show host, so we're going to have to figure out how to make that work. My assumption at the time was the Republican Party as an institution would be able to do that. And David told me nothing. There's nothing left of the Republican Party as an institution that's going to handle this guy, because he's a force of personality, he's a cult of personality, and we don't have defenses for that. Well, here we are, I guess, just kind of doing the mental math, probably about 8 or 9 years later, and I think that was correct. And again, people will say this is good. We've drained the swamp. We've kicked out the old rhinos. I don't care. I'm not offering this as a criticism or an endorsement.
Yeah, we're Canadians here, man. We don't even go here, man.
I just saying, I think the objective analysis of this situation is that MAGA is now the Republican Party, and that a second Trump administration will not have some of the institutional or even societal guardrails of the first one. And if you take him seriously or literally, what kind of changes does he propose for American democracy? And here's the incredible thing. They're not all going to be bad.
No, absolutely.
There will be things that he might do that the average Canadian may in good faith be like, yeah, it's good. There may also be things that he does that scare the shit out of us collectively as Canadians. But there is no ability anymore in the broader electorate, US or Canadian, for it to be a reasonable position to be like, I like these things that he did, but I don't like what he's doing on this. That kind of nuance almost doesn't exist anymore. Were you watching the TV on Saturday after the assassination attempt?
Yeah. Yeah.
CNN interviewed this guy in a red shirt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what his name was, but the guy gave like the most reasonable and coherent, not incoherent, coherent statement. I was thinking to myself, I don't know who this guy is, this random Trump rally attending Pennsylvanian, but let's make him president for a term. But no, so I want to talk just for a couple minutes about Biden here, but Trump is just something that is now a complete personality test almost at this point. To discuss him rationally is what we're paid to do, so we'll continue doing it. But for everyone else right now, Trump is like a button you affix on your vest when you go out to a political convention, and you can look at the button, or even like a couple of buttons. You kind of just look down someone's lapel, and you're like, oh, okay, I know all I need to know about this person as a politician. Trump is a symbol as much as he is a man. And there is no one left in America who I think who has the personal or institutional credibility to call balls and strikes. And just to go, well, you know what? I don't like Trump, but I think he's accurate about this. I think this proposal is actually going to make things better at the border, or it's going to make trade better. I also don't think there's anyone who can credibly sound the alarm on Trump when he goes too far. It's like, look, I'm a Republican, I support the president, but this policy is dangerous. This is a bad precedent.
And those two things are interconnected, because if you don't have someone who can be trusted to call the balls and strikes, you also have no one to listen to you when the alarm actually is risen. And I think this is also why you and I are doing our best to cultivate a kind of morally neutral tone in our analysis here. Firstly, because, again, we're Canadians. We don't go here, man. Like, we're looking at all this from the outside. This ain't our country, not our circus, not our monkeys, okay? Nobody, like, us screaming into the void about the rising fascist tide is not going to sway a single American voter. That's not valuable. That's not a valuable use of our time, and it's not a valuable use of our audience's listening time. So we're not going to waste our time doing any of that. It's just not. It's not productive. It's just not productive. That's not productive. All right, for people in our position to be engaged in this. And also, I think that if there's any lesson that people like ourselves in the media ought to have learned, it's that when you lose the credibility to engage in a neutral, even-handed analysis of the good and the bad of a party or an individual or a policy, you also lose the ability to raise the alarm in a way that gains credibility with an audience.
I think it's happening. So
I do too. No, it's right. So I don't know how we as an series of institutional figures gain that credibility back, but I certainly am convinced that me screaming into the void of the evils of Trump doesn't help anything. It doesn't serve anyone to do that.
You know what it serves, honestly, Jen? It serves the in-group, out-group.
Sure. I'm sure I would be much more popular with fellow Canadian journalists if I engaged in that kind of stuff. So no dispute. But at this point, I'm, a middle-aged woman with 2 children who lives in the suburbs of Calgary. I don't really care about being popular anymore. I'm just a sullen, borderline autistic lunatic, and I'm perfectly happy to live in that space, like a swamp monster. Except
we get that on a button?
On the prairie. Yeah, I think we could. We're going to need some art.
Be a big button, but
it would have to involve a bird of some kind, maybe like a penguin. Actually, my Facebook profile is a penguin holding a machete, and it's the word "become ungovernable." It's kind of my motto now. On that note, I think that we should say like and subscribe. Yes, we are going to do mugs this year. I've decided we're doing mugs for Christmas.
Like and subscribe. We'll come back in a minute. We'll talk a little bit Biden, and then we'll move on to some Canadian stuff. But for now, like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
So, Matt, you wanted to chat a little bit more about Biden, and then I think we're going to switch to our more comfortable métier, which is Ottawa scuttlebutt. But first, let's what? The Democrats, the hell, the rumors that we are hearing.
So
chaos.
something I'm not going to reveal a lot of personal detail here, but something that Jen is aware of is that my family has been dealing with the kind of a medical issue for the last month or so, and things are, I'm happy to say, much better now. But the night of the debate was kind of right in the midst of kind of when things were at their peak, and I was running from, I was running on like zero sleep and a lot of adrenaline and caffeine and bad vibes. And I was able to catch like 5 or 10 minutes of the debate. And I just had this immediate sense of, oh, Biden's going to lose. Yeah. But I can't worry about it now because I got like 15,000 other things that need my attention at this exact moment. So I caught like 5 minutes of the debate while standing over the sink, eating food that my mother had prepared for me and that my mother-in-law had served to me. Leaning over the sink, going, eating as fast as I can because I hadn't eaten anything that day, watching Biden flailing and just going, he's done. Yeah. He's finished. And then you and I are not plugged in full time to American politics, but we do have some US sources. It's just, you can't work at a high level in Canadian journalism as long as we have without meeting colleagues in the States. Combined with what we're hearing, with what is being openly reported in the American press, there's a lot of speculation that Biden is going to step down as nominee this
probably
weekend.
The moment that we're done this podcast in order to make it real.
Well, just as we were starting it, I think the third senator had come out calling for him to step down, and I don't know what he's going to do. I'm a spectator. I'm watching, but you know what? Here's the thing. Always been an admirer of Joe Biden, always respected Joe Biden, the kind of Democrat I think I could work with. And been looking at him over his term and noticing him having what we could politely call his senior moments. And I've never really known, because Biden's always been gaffe prone, how seriously to take those. I guess kind of part of his armor was just that people already expected him to fuck stuff up on a fairly regular basis. And seeing that debate, reading the Clooney op-ed, listening to anonymous Democrats leaking to Politico and the Atlantic and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, it appears as though Biden has deteriorated sharply in the relatively recent history. Mm-hmm. I have seen this in people in my own family. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. President Biden today reminds me of my grandfather. I love my papa. I miss my papa. I would not have voted for him. You know, my grandfather knew when it was time to give up his car because he would be driving and then he would be stopped at a light and the light would change green and he wouldn't know where he was supposed to be going. My grandfather would take a walk to the store and go missing for 7 hours because 100 feet from the house, he'd forget where he was going. My grandfather knew when it was time to give up his rifles because he was a military veteran and a hunter, and he knew it was time to give them up. Does Biden know when it's time to give up the Oval Office, or at least the aspirations for a second term? I don't know. But apparently Chuck Schumer, Pelosi, they're all over him now.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
So here's a fun scenario. I was talking to you in the first segment there before we hit the like and subscribe break about just imagine a timeline where Donald Trump on Saturday of last week is not killed and is not slightly wounded. He's seriously wounded. Let's start thinking through a scenario.
Journalism requires a dark imagination.
Especially these days. Didn't used to. I spent like a year writing about labor negotiations between the Ontario government and the school boards. That was the biggest thing going on in this province, and it wasn't that long ago. Imagine a scenario where Mr. Biden announces, perhaps as soon as this weekend, that he is not going to be the nominee, that he is withdrawing his contention, and that is time. And he will not do it for reasons of health. For the reason I'm about to explain. He will, if he does it, hypothetically speaking, if he does it, it will be, I have listened to the voices of my family and my closest advisors, and we agree it is time for new leadership in the Democratic Party people better positioned than I am to understand the concerns of young Americans, blah, blah, blah. He'll write it up as if it's a gift to the voters. But everybody is going to know it's because no one thinks Papa can do it anymore. And how does he serve 6 months as president with immediate launch authority over 1,500 nuclear weapons that are on ready alert? He's going to try and spin it as a political choice. Everyone's going to know it's a health choice. I don't know how the U.S. government functions for the next 6 months if Biden steps down as nominee but does not step down as president. Now, I was talking about this morning with one of my friends, and one of my friends says, "Oh, there's no way he's leaving the Oval Office a day earlier than necessary." And I know, I agree. But then think about that. Where are we 3 weeks from now? Again, hypothetically, he announces this weekend that he's going to step down as nominee, but that he will remain in the Oval Office. And then 2 weeks from now, God forbid, some car bomb goes off outside an embassy, or there's an emergency on the space station or something, right? Anything. And Donald Trump's going to be at a rally somewhere in Maryland or Nevada, and he's going to say, "Who's making the calls right now? The guy can't even run against me. Look at me, I got shot. Here I am giving a speech. He can't even run against me, but he's in the Oval Office right now." CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, they're going to make whoever the Democratic candidate ends up being, every single question at every campaign event is going to be, "Do you have faith in the president?" They're going to announce new childcare initiatives or high-speed rail, or we're going to land on Mars by 2035 or whatever. And the question is going to be, "Hello, Vice President Harris or Governor Newsom or whoever it happens to be. Are you confident in the president's mental health right now?"
I'm not sure what your point is.
I'm not sure I have a point, except just imagine what the next 6 months are going to be like.
Well, they're going to be more of what they've been to date. I mean,
I think it's going to get worse.
Yeah, of course it's going to get worse. But I mean, the reason why I'm less concerned about that is because, I mean, if he announces he steps down, there's an end frame. Like, there's an end timeline. It's not like we're talking about another 4 years of Biden. We're talking about another 6 months.
6 months.
Right. I think that's a different scenario. So if anything, I think if he announces that he's going to step down, a lot of the pressure kind of comes off of him. And I think on the plus side, look, yeah, okay, technically he's holding the nuclear codes, but have you seen a man in his state try to program a remote control? I don't think that the odds that he's going to be able to use them are high.
Oh, it's the guy. All he needs to do is have the card. The Air Force does the rest.
Yeah, but you still need to be able to read the codes out, right? Reliably.
I think you just need to give them to the guy with the football. I think he authenticates them. But anyway, we're getting bad joke. But anyway, moving on. Can I just make a point? Can I just say, the Democrats can never do this again. Whether it's Biden or Ginsburg, the health of the republic can no longer hinge on the cognitive and physical viability of people who I would be reluctant to get into a car if they're driving it.
I'll go further than that. The boomers need to not let this happen again. It's time for the boomers to go. I'm not talking the youngest of the generation. I'm talking about...
always try to piss off the boomers.
I do, but
Jen, this is my favorite sourdough bread recipe, and Jen goes, "Fuck the boomers."
No, I mean, look, I'm not even being accurate here, because technically Biden's greatest generation. But I mean, that one of the lessons that our generation has got to learn from the previous generation is understanding when it's time to go, when it's time to let go and pass the baton on to the next generation and assume your role as mentor and elder figure. You cannot. America at this point is a gerontocracy. It is a cult of the old that cannot let go and pass power on to the young. And I blame Trump for this just as much as Biden, because Trump's 77. And I would say if there's
too.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's one thing that I would give Trump credit for, one thing in a spirit of charity, is that he's passed his running mate seat to JD Vance, who I believe is 40.
Not even. It's 39.
39.
I think he's the youngest VP candidate ever, I think.
Now, I have some issues with JD Vance and his moral compass, but I give credit to the fact that he's passed this baton to someone who's 39. That begins a process of generational renewal on the GOP side that the Democrats need to follow. I don't think the
Democrats trust their youth.
Well, they don't have a choice now, do they? Because they're going to die. I don't know what to tell you. There's a point at which you have to let it go. And it's not just the Democrat. I think we've done, I say again, we've talked about this before. We've done generational renewal better in Canada than the Americans have done, right? Like our leaders are younger. That's good. That's a good thing. All right. But America just cannot let it go. And it can't be allowed to continue.
Trudeau's probably the oldest major party leader.
There is a life cycle. We are all part of it. We are all part of the cycle of life, man. Yep. Anyway, but I also think it applies more to politics. This applies to business. This applies to all walks of life, right? We all have to come to terms with where we are in our life cycles, and make the best of and ask ourselves, am I doing the best that I can with that position that I'm in the life cycle? I mean, I'm 40 now. I've got 2 kids. I'm at the peak of my bullshit hell life cycle. All right. In 10 years, I'll have a little more flexibility. And in 20 years after that, it will be time to mentor the next generation and help them along and
improve your golf game.
And improve my golf game or my sewing skills or whatever it is. Like, that is the correct answer here, man. We all die. It's all going to happen.
I'm glad. We probably should have done this in the Trump focus section, but I saw this tweet this morning from, I don't know who it was, some Democrat blue check account in the States with a large profile, who demanded to know, why is Biden's every quirk poured over but Trump, who also is falling asleep in public and says bizarre things and trails off in mid-sentences? Why does no one talk about that? And it really speaks to what I was telling you earlier, Jen, about there's no moderating influence anymore. Because in fact, the mainstream press has been writing about Donald Trump's cognitive health for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And the idea that, why is no one writing about this? I cannot tell you how many articles I read during his first term about his frontal cortex or what, like just.
And his presumed personality disorders and his cognitive capabilities. Like, yes.
It's all known, and they're built for him anyway.
He's also glitching. He's also not at peak form. He just looks better compared to the other option on display on this particular front.
And
that's
it may
just
be
what it is.
And it's totally about looks, right? Because some people, when they get senile, they become wisps of the person they were.
And you know what I think is so tragic is that if you actually look at a written version of that debate that depressed you so much, like the written version of the debate, if you didn't have any other visual cues, I think that you could make an argument that Biden run that debate on just like what he actually said, the words that are on record. Go read that debate versus watching it, and I think you're going to get if your understanding of that debate was solely on the written, you'd be like, yeah, this is a guy who actually understands the issues much better than Trump, no question. The problem is that the second you see him on video, on camera, and the tone of his voice and the weakness and the frailty start to come out, and you go like, oh no, Papa needs the car keys taken away.
My dead grandfather, who I would take him out golfing, and he would line up and shoot the ball 180 degrees in the wrong direction.
Right.
Hop out of the golf cart, line up. He had the muscle memory to take a great golf shot. It was going back to the tees.
Do I actually trust that Biden has a much better grasp of complicated issues than Donald Trump? Yes. Actually, I do. Even at this state, I do. But man, wow.
You know, I've said this about Freeland before, right? People need to stop being pissed off when we demand our politicians be good at politics.
I don't think it's unreasonable. So like and subscribe, but also let's talk Canadian politics. Subscribe. Matt, we went on long about American politics, so I don't want to belabor the point on the Canadian side, but there are three things that I think are worth mentioning from this week in Canadian politics. One, there was
relatively calm week, but there's some stuff
relatively calm week, yeah. Globe and Mail story about how Justin Trudeau met with Mark Carney and encouraged him to come to government, but didn't guarantee him a cabinet position. Yep. So interesting speculation as to what that was all about. I thought the best and most interesting analysis on this stuff actually came from Michelle Rempel in her Twitter account, who suggested that this was, a deep assassination attempt. So calling Mark Carney saying, run for politics, but no, I'm not going to guarantee you a cabinet position. You can sit on the backbench, vote for my bullshit. You know what I mean? That straight up power play. B, what that does is that by leaking that to the Globe and Mail, what the PMO is communicating to, so he's trying to force Carney's hand. Well, at the same time, if Carney doesn't take up the offer and doesn't run for politics, it kind of neuters him because, okay, wait a minute, you're not a team player. You're not willing to fight for the team. You're not willing to go down for the team. Who the hell are you? You're an opportunist. So it undermines his long-term sort of leadership bid. And C, just I think the theory is that essentially this is him communicating to everybody that he's not going anywhere. He's effectively outmaneuvered his lead political rival in one news leak. So very interesting. I think that analysis might be correct. However, if it was a political maneuver on the Prime Minister's part, the counter to that argument is he hasn't actually screwed up Carney at all. Because all Carney has to say is, this is a gong show. I'm holding my peace until Justin Trudeau steps aside or is forced to go, and then I'm going to come in as the riding savior. Like I don't necessarily think that hurts him. However, it does kind of force Carney's hand in the short term, and I think in doing so, ironically, kind of buttresses Trudeau's own leadership within his caucus. If there's no white knight coming in to rescue the Liberal caucus, then that's that coup over.
I think I share your assessment on that. So obviously, as we've been covering in the podcast of recent weeks, tons of speculation about the political future of Justin Trudeau. Well, I think he just told us, because what he has shown this week is that he was tired of the Carney bullshit. And we spoke at length last week about Freeland, and that speculation all remains in play. But I agree with Michelle Rempel Garner's take on this. What Trudeau has done is he has taken away from Carney what Carney had been shamelessly exploiting up until now, which is ambiguity.
Right.
Where Carney's been half pregnant for months. Right. Where it's kind of, hey, I'm in, but I'm out. I'm showing up at, we joked about this in a previous podcast. Here I'm in an Oilers jersey with a bud. Mm-hmm. But am I in? Oh no, I'm just deciding to slum it at like Ribfest. And without ever actually being forced by anyone to say I'm in or out or make a declarative statement. I suspect from the PM's perspective, even like not even thinking about like party renewal 5 or 10 years down the road, he's probably just spent about enough time on it, and he's got other stuff to do and other problems to have, political or policy. And it was just time to shut Mark Carney up. And it was time to shut up the speculation about Mark Carney, and offering him a job with no guarantees. Yeah, that's smart politics. And I make this point often. Trudeau's a good politician. And he basically, like I said, he took away the one thing Carney has been ruthlessly exploiting, which is ambiguity. In or out, Mark, make the call. You're not half pregnant anymore. Here's a pregnancy test. Go pee on it and let me know.
It's very funny. But however, I would like to take this moment to do a bit of a victory lap that so far my prediction on Trudeau has proven correct. Everyone was saying months ago that he's going to step down. He has to step down. Look at his polling numbers. He has to step down. I was like, no, I don't think he is. I don't think he's going to step down.
I still think there's more chance he does now, because I still think we can't rule out the fuck it reflex, which is just one day he's apparently. So I'm not going to go on a whole podcasting here, but yesterday we mentioned this in previous dispatch. We got the new top soldier for the Canadian Armed Forces. Mm-hmm. Prime Minister had to be there for the ceremony. There had to be that little cabinet shuffle today. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I believe he's on vacation now. I don't rule out that he comes back in 2 weeks after getting toned on a beach and goes, this sucks.
No, he's pot committed now. He's pot committed psychologically. I don't think he's not going to fuck it. Now, and I'm going to say, I can't rule out the possibility that his caucus is going to panic and kick him out.
Yeah.
I can't rule out weird desperation play stuff happening. But no, I think the party's constitution is set up in such a way that a leadership race is going to be a nightmare whenever it does happen. I don't think Mark Carney is not riding in to save the day and is not going, Trudeau is very clearly not going to lay out the welcome mat for his rival. I think his ego is now committed. He's pot committed, and we've run into the sunk cost fallacy at this point.
Yep.
If he had left a year ago, he might have been able to leave with some grace and have some control over succession planning. But at this point, he's burned his rivals to the ground, and he can't leave. He's not going anywhere. He can't fuck it. He can't. You know what? He can't.
If we accept that, though, you know what's really interesting then?
What?
Why the Freeland stuff last week?
Oh, I still think that's in play. I still think that they're operating under the assumption that they can blame Freeland for the unpopularity of the government. I think they're thinking they can basically transfer, because she is unliked and not very likable, not a good politician. I'm not saying that a personal response, but it's what it is. She's not very popular. I think they can transfer the dislike that people feel toward the government as a whole onto her and make her wear it symbolically. I still think that's the plan.
Yeah,
no, I don't think it's. I think that's absolutely not going to work and is crazy. But I think that's what the thinking is.
So you start slowly assassinating, again, to be clear, politically speaking, Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah.
You neuter Mark Carney, again, politically speaking. And Trudeau pivots and makes the long run into the sunset. Whenever that election comes, he's the guy.
Yeah.
Well,
now, unless there's panic,
or
unless there's
events.
a mutiny, again, I never rule out the possibility that some people lose their minds. But as we have seen, this is not a Liberal caucus that has the sort of internal fortitude to actually boot him. Their inner mutiny was laughable and was undermined within 2 days with a couple of phone calls from Stephen Guilbeault, for Christ's sakes. I mean, no Garumba. So there we go. And then that brings us to the second part of the conversation, is that more chatter is now coming out about a summer cabinet shuffle. And again, more news coming out about appointments. Now, what did I say 2 weeks ago? A lot of people are going to use threats of a leadership coup to try to angle for better positions, cabinet positions, appointments, roles, maybe even roles outside of politics, all of that kind of thing. And again,
ambassador to Cuba or whatever.
And we're starting to see exactly that. So we're going to hear news about a range of probably very expensive appointments for the taxpayer that will soon come out, and that will calm the caucus down.
Yeah, and look, this week, I don't have much to say about this, but Seamus O'Regan, Labour Minister, not announced and then immediately executed. It was not one of these 3-month timeline things. He quit cabinet on 24 hours notice, so he's already out, and he's been replaced by, I think, Steve McKinnon, who had been interim government house leader, replaced him. I honestly don't have a lot to say about that. I knew Seamus back at CTV back in the day. I wish him nothing but happiness. He's still a young guy. He's been very open about the toll the job's taken on his family. I wish him every success. I think he's got a lot of great things ahead of him. Hopefully he and his husband can take a nice long vacation and chill out a bit. But what I would say, and again, Seamus, I don't say this, buddy, to pick on you. I'm just saying, I wonder if there'll be others, right?
Of course.
Because I remember, probably at some point, PMO has got to go around and poll everybody, just like they would before any election, and just say, okay, who's in, who's out, because we're going to have to make decisions about who's going to be the team in the next election. Seamus didn't wait. He's just gone. So
I wonder if he's actually going to be appointed to, like you said, a diplomatic post or something, and that's the plan, right?
Oh, honestly, I don't know. I haven't talked to him. But
I'm saying that's sort of one of the things I would look for in the next little while. Last little thing I wanted to chat about for Canadian politics was, again, I'm pivoting back to American politics, and I apologize, and that was Pierre Poilievre's response to the Trump potential assassination attempt. And that was where Pierre Poilievre went on Twitter and was like, "I'm glad the shooter's dead." And of course, everybody lost their minds because none of these people can help themselves. Look, I don't know what else to say. You have got to stop losing your mind over Pierre Poilievre's tone. it's a trap every time. Every time people lose it, nobody's going to hold the fact that Pierre Poilievre wanted a shooter dead against him. Literally nobody. Is it unbecoming for a future leader to tweet something as crass as that? Yes.
Yeah.
No one cares.
No one cares. I wish.
No one cares.
Honestly, I wish I could be a columnist in a country where people did give a shit about these things.
Nobody cares about these. And also, like I said, one of the interesting shifts that I think is out happening as well is as we move away from power, the way that the power is concentrated in this country, into how should I say this? I'm gonna struggle to articulate this, but this country has always been very caught up in tone, politeness, the forms, if you will. And sure. I think that
we're the polite country.
Polite country, exactly. So the idea that you would have a leader or a potential prime minister not engage in the forms of decorum, the forms of language that we expect a leader, is really, really hard thing for a lot of people who have traditionally held positions of influence and power in this country to accept and understand. Yeah. I also think that what they're not understanding is that in refusing to hold to those forms of politeness, Pierre is speaking to a lot of people in Canada where they actually are.
Oh yeah, bingo. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Right. Like most people in Canada aren't that hung up on swearing. They're not that polite. They're not actually any of these things. Like it's a bit of a rarefied class that fixates on these sorts of problems. And Pierre and his refusal to defer to those expectations is demonstrating his lack of, or his indifference to that rarefied class.
I think to tie kind of a ribbon around everything we've been talking about today, something that future historians, if any, are going to have to grapple with is the extent to which our entire civilization hinged on a series of unspoken, unrecorded societal norms, mm-hmm. and what an unbelievable superpower it was to simply be shameless enough to not give a shit.
That's right. Yeah.
And I honestly still maintain to this day, being in the Toronto media was great training. During the Rob Ford era was great training for the Trump era.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I think one of the things we've discovered is that when you have a bunch of people on a stage and they're all playing by the rules of normal political discourse, and you have a guy who steps on the stage, fart loudly, and tells everyone to go fuck themselves, and that person wins, that's a lesson we should have learned and haven't. And again, I don't like it at all, but I'm tired of spending my life arguing against reality. Like I need to, and you need to, we all need to, kind of like a royal eye in that case, I guess, but we all need to engage with reality as it is. And also, not as we would
forms
prefer.
Are fine. Forms are fine so long as they're not
being used to obscure and cover up failure.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Canada,
and I think that's there's an element of refreshment to the breaking of the forms when that's been the case.
Oh, the transgressive has always been attractive.
But it's more than that, because the transgressive is necessary sometimes. If the underlying systems are not functioning the way they ought to be, or they're not, if people feel like the existing sort of established polite leadership, if you will, is not performing appropriately in its tier, and everybody's happy about their quality of life, then transgressiveness doesn't hold a lot of potency.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Then it's nice to be nice.
Then it's nice to be nice, right? Like if everything's working right and my life is fine and it's great,
then who wants to be the fly in the ointment when everything's otherwise fantastic?
Yes, that's right. But when the forms of politeness and the tone is being used to cover up failure or a decline in a lot of these assumptions, then all of a sudden transgression is not only very attractive, it's actually necessary, because you need someone to break through the forms to actually get to the issues underlying and the problems underlying. So this is why I think Pierre Poilievre gets away with saying things like this, because he comes across to people as a straight shooter who's actually going to say it like it is and not be engaged in, the petty high level virtue nonsense that only goes over well at like Tyronies in Toronto and highs in Ottawa, right?
Well, I love Tyronies, but yes, I know your point.
That's what he's actually communicating with that. And I think that a lot of people who get caught up in the tone policing don't understand that. And it's frustrating to watch, and it's sad to watch.
Yep, I agree. And I've said to you many times the last couple of years that, like, if I have one meta theory for why Canada's broken, it's because we've nerfed our accountability mechanisms.
That's right. Because accountability mechanisms are kind of mean, Matt. Don't you understand how hard everyone's trying? We
didn't nerf our accountability mechanisms, and the media is included in that. Mm-hmm. We didn't nerf them out of corruption. We did it out of politeness.
Well, there's a hell of a lot of corruption there too. Let's not kid ourselves.
No, but I don't think that was the motive. I think we gradually began sanding down all the sharp edges that could shred a career when it deserved to be shredded because, it's awkward because he's such a nice guy. I know his kids. I went to his kids' bar mitzvah.
And when things are going well, you have the luxury of allowing for competence.
Oh, sure, because you can just take...
Yeah, there's so much give in the system that it doesn't
Jim's
matter.
fucking up. We're just going to shuffle him off somewhere, and he'll do no harm there, and then there's no awkwardness at the golf club.
And if you have lots of money coming in and everybody's doing well, you have the luxury of engaging in that.
Yeah.
It's when things get hard what's the old saying? It's like when the water well runs dry, the animals turn mean.
Or they start to look at each other funny, yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we're seeing right now socially, right? The water well's starting to run a little dry, or at the very least, we're starting to see the beginning of signs that the water well's running dry and the animals are turning mean. And sometimes that's, sorry to say it, sometimes that's necessary. I don't know what to say. Sometimes you need to be mean. It's just, the peak moment of Canada came for me a couple of years ago when what was it? Chris Selly and I were making fun of CBC Comedy, and someone who worked at CBC Comedy sent us a note privately and was like,
"You're really hurting our feelings.
You're really hurting our feelings, and we are working really hard on this." And because we were jackals, we of course laughed our asses off and sent it off to Canadaland. How hard you're working doesn't matter. No one cares. Work hard, work not hard. Get shit done. Fix it.
I think the better example is Global Affairs Canada giving itself an award for the Afghan evacuation.
Peak Canada right there. Peak Canada. But because they want to make
everybody works so hard, Jen.
Everybody works so hard.
Yeah, and morale
works so hard.
The total epic face-planting failure, the catastrophic meltdown really hurt morale. So they needed to issue a plaque to make everybody feel better.
You're right. That's exactly right. And like I said, this is an example of the forms covering for the decline in competence, right?
I get
these
it.
Examples are it.
I know where it comes from. I agree with you, but I'm still going to miss the polite era.
Well, but I'm also going to miss the more competent era too.
I already missed the more competent era.
On that note, we're going to sum up the last bit of news. Like and subscribe.
So we're talking just a minute ago, Jen, about we're going to miss the era of competency. You know what I wouldn't miss at this point? And I'm well aware of the irony of I'm saying this on a podcast.
Go for it.
The internet. I think the internet was a mistake, but I think we should consider turning it off. So while we record this, and it's worth noting that you and I had a little bit of minor technical difficulty today.
Less technical difficulty than usual, I will point out.
That's true. But a specific technical difficulty that we think might be related to the global IT outage that has been making headlines since I woke up. So you're a couple of hours behind me in Calgary, but I woke up early. I think I'm just turning old. I no longer seem to need as much sleep as I used to. I'm kind of waking up naturally, even in the summer, at around 6 a.m. and grabbed my phone, looked at it, and I saw that American Airlines, United, Delta was canceling flights all over the place. Banks were shutting down. Hospitals were canceling surgeries. It looks like an accident. That's the best information at this time when we record this. But a large IT management company apparently pushed a patch and broke 1 billion computers.
Oops.
So I've been speaking with a buddy of mine who's a cybersecurity expert and an IT expert. Actually, I've been talking to a couple of them today, and they're freaked out. And they're not freaked out in the sense that they're worried that this is going to kill us. But they're basically saying, no, this is the thing that we've been trying to get people to take seriously. Because apparently right now there's about 1 billion computers in the world that are bricked. and they'll have to be manually reset because they've been broken in a way that just makes it hard to push the patch. This is not like an update your iPhone overnight to get the latest security things. Apparently, we've really borked these computers. And was one of my buddies said to me this morning, this looks like a bad patch, but if this was a malicious cyber attack, if we bork a significant part of the internet's backend in a way that's non-recoverable without like manual intervention, we are so dependent on the stupidest of technologies.
On that note, my husband has advised me not to like update my Windows 11. So, yeah, don't update your computers today, folks, or this week. Really just put it off.
Just ride this one out for a bit.
I wanted to chat a little bit about the news. Toronto is flooded, apparently. Sorry about that. Why did I want to talk about Toronto flooding? Not because I'm super interested in Toronto local news, but there's one thing I wanted to make. Another point I wanted to use. I wanted to use this particular news item to make a point that I've frequently made about the carbon tax, and particularly the error of trying to get political buy-in for the carbon tax with the carbon rebate. I do not want to waste another moment of my life arguing on Twitter with an economist who guarantees that if I just sat down with his PowerPoint presentation, he could demonstrate to me how the carbon tax rebate is the most efficient, economically efficient form of a carbon tax approach, okay? It doesn't work politically. It's terrible communications. Everyone will spend all of their lives arguing that they're not better off with the rebate. People hate the tax. It also obfuscates this supposed mission of the tax, okay? It's just bad politics. And
okay, I'm going to do this very quickly. I don't want anyone to see this, but you see what I just did there on the video?
No, I didn't.
You know what that is?
No.
It's the envelope with my carbon tax rebate check.
Oh, there you go. Anyway, nobody cares.
Arrived this week.
Yeah, but as I said, it's just really poor politics. And when your version of, if only we communicated this better by trying to get a dozen more economists to explain to Canadians via PowerPoint presentation why this is good for them.
The next open letter needs a few more signatories.
Yeah, exactly. Like when that's your strategy here, I mean, you've lost. Meanwhile, Toronto's flooded. What if you just did the carbon tax, didn't do the rebate, but put all the money for the carbon tax into climate change mitigation and hardening and prevention?
Or infrastructure renewal that has green benefits, right?
Yeah, green benefits, green design, and like do what the Harper government did, where they put big signs up, said this infrastructure renovation brought to you by Canada's carbon tax. We're doing this for this reason, and here's how we're funding it. Then people can literally see the way that their money is being spent toward the achievable aim of trying to deal with climate change.
No.
So not only does the carbon tax then work to actually try and disincentivize carbon intensive behaviors, so it still works on that front. But then people can then see that you really mean it.
Better sewers,
better flood, and then that helps us to address some of our lingering state of good repair problems as well, because you can probably put some of that money to state of good repair maintenance.
Slap a solar panel on the roof of every publicly owned building.
Super great. Mm-hmm. Do that stuff.
No, send me a check instead.
Then you could get actually buy-in for the carbon.
No, I want my check.
Because the flooding and then the wildfires. No, but instead
give me checks or give me death.
Instead, let's pretend that the carbon tax will have any actual effect on the real natural disasters that we will be facing in the next several decades as a result of climate change. Because, let's also be clear, it won't. So what if we were to... See what I'm getting at here?
Who has that kind of time?
I'm just saying, this would be an opportunity to get buy-in.
I got a check in the mail today. I opened it and I felt
How
good
much was it
inside.
for? How much was it for?
I didn't look. A few $100.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go blow it all.
But hey, I'm sure if your basement was flooded, that few $100 would go a long way.
My basement did flood a few months ago. Actually, it's funny. I expected to get back from out of town and find my basement flooded because my basement is prone to flooding. And in fact, it was fine.
Great.
So
Super.
Union Station underwater, people in my neighborhood specifically posting frantically on Facebook, like the community Facebook group, saying like, please come help me bail my house out. Or if you have like a big shop vac that can handle water, I need it. I'm fine. And I got a check today.
So the federal government actually apparently has also announced a flood insurance, like a federal government backed flood insurance program, because a lot of private insurers, home insurers,
are backing out of houses.
Yeah, they're backing out of houses flooding because it's just costing them way too much money. So you can't, in a lot of places, Calgary included, for example, you can't get overland flood insurance. It's just not available. It's not on option. Always get sewer backup though. Pro tip: let me tell you, as someone who lived through the 2013 floods, sewer backup. Do it.
I've got it for a reason.
Yeah. Anyway. But point is being, so this is the sort of thing where, there's a market failure. The federal government should be stepping in to provide this. I think this is a good idea. This is smart. This is correct. What if you were to use the carbon tax to help backstop that program?
Don't be silly. It's not what we do in Canada. You know what we do in Canada? The middle class and those working hard to join it. Mm-hmm. I think I left out like a adjective or a verb there.
Doesn't matter. There was a ministry for it for a time.
There was a ministry for it, wasn't there? Is there still?
No, afuera.
Pardon me?
Afuera.
Afuera what?
Oh, it's nobody gets the joke except for losers. It's the Javier Milei joke. Afuera, afuera, afuera. Where he gets rid of the ministries. Anyway, never mind.
More people got my Garumba joke than got your afuera joke.
Is that true, commentators? Is that true? Anyway,
if you want to throw this one open to the
What's your point? What's your point? My joke didn't land. It's fine. Moving on.
Okay. Last thing you wanted to mention was equalization lawsuit.
Yes. So it looks like David Eby, BC NDP leader, is joining, I believe, Newfoundland in suing the government's unfair equalization policy with the argument that, firstly, it's ridiculous that Ontario and Quebec, ostensibly some of the wealthiest provinces in the country, are taking billions of dollars out of the equalization program that, like, not just Alberta, but BC and other provinces are paying into. That's insane. Also, it's totally ridiculous that this program is forcing people to pay in at a certain rate. And yet, if you look at the way that the federal government is distributing funds to things like, for example, EV plants in Ontario or bridges in Quebec, like those are things that the rest of the country, there's no way the rest of the country will ever get access to those kinds of funds because they're also about political patronage. So therefore, when you take all of this into consideration, equalization is unfair. And everyone in Alberta is like, Been mentioning that for a couple years now, and yet whenever like those rowdy Albertans were talking about the unfairness of the equalization fund, again, all my Twitter feed gets swarmed with economists basically saying, well, the equalization, it's not like you're literally paying into the equalization program. This is not how the system works, and blah, 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 blah. And then the second that a progressive premier starts basically saying exactly the same things, I hear no complaints. Nothing but silence.
Okay.
Just saying.
Okay. Here, I'm going to have my own just saying moment right now, okay?
All right, just saying.
And I'm going to have to, as I so often do, remind Albertans that I love them.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay.
But you'd be more credible on the big issues if you pick fewer stupid fights.
Don't even disagree. And also, the equalization referendum we had was clearly very stupid. That was stupid. And I've always said it was stupid.
Province that cried wolf.
Province that cried wolf. No, I don't. And like I said, I'm actually not opposed to an equalization program because I do think that you do need to have an equal amount of equal services across the country. I don't want people in Newfoundland
or if the
not
kids were
getting access.
Were dying of rickets, it would be a problem.
Yeah, precisely, absolutely. Like within reason,
Newfoundland,
yes.
We're just picking on you, but
no, but I mean, like of course, reasonable equalization payments are appropriate. Okay.
You die from rickets, or do you just get deformed?
I think you get deformed. Anyway, but like
we're suffering from rickets.
When the bulk of these equalization payments are going to Quebec and Ontario, how do you read this as anything other than a political patronage conversation? In addition to the other types of particular subsidies and funding that go to, say, for example, Bombardier or SNC-Lavalin, or again EV funding, or those types of programs are not equally distributed around the country, and no one even pretends they are. So what the hell are you doing? Anyway, moving on. That's all I have to say about the matter.
Yep, no, and I got nothing else. Sorry, guys. You're the province that cried wolf. You've started so many bullshit little things that when you're right, and I think you are right on this one, no one listens.
I know.
You guys so desperately want to be as edgy and as controversial as Quebec, but you're not. Quebec's better at it and smarter and more strategic.
And also they got more people.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Like,
as long as
you
Quebec
guys are just trying to make up with volume of stupidity what Quebec has been able to accomplish with 150 fucking years of slowly chipping away at it.
I know. And, I keep on saying that like Alberta and Quebec are the flip sides of the same coin. We are.
Sort of.
We're actually we're each other's sisters. We're each other's brothers in arms. It's very funny to me. But anyway,
if Albertans could get over themselves a little bit, you guys would be much more effective.
I think that's probably right. And then the other thing that Alberta actually needs in order to have a much more effective voice in Confederation is like
sales
4 times. Well, that would help the finances, but it's 4 times the population.
Sure. Yeah.
Bring Alberta's population to 12 million.
Yeah. And then
in a generation, and then we can talk. We become a radically different power center in this country than we are today. But as long as we're a population of sub 5, do the math. It's just what it is. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got to say this week.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
And I love you, Alberta.
And we love you too, Matt.